I am going to introduce Marguerite Wells, who is going to be the moderator for this discussion. Marguerite is a leader. In her quiet and unassuming manner, she's collected a team of professionals to work on disseminating information for all over our state. I see it every day. Marguerite and her team at ACE New York, they've been invaluable, by the way, for us, for Energy 21. They've really helped us put this on because this really is a massive undertaking. And her whole team, where's her team? Are you here? Raise your hands. There they are. Okay, I haven't said hello yet. I hope you, by the way, I hope you keep an eye out. I'm going to, ACE New York has wonderful webinars on Zoom, wonderful webinars. They are literally educating the whole state. Between them and League of Conservation Voters, they really have wonderful webinars. Keep an eye, you'll be getting my newsletters, and I'm going to include that. So when you have a chance, if it's a topic that you're interested in, or even if it isn't and you really want to learn something, go on to their webinars. They are free and fabulous. So, and with that, Marguerite is going to be the moderator for our esteemed panel answering the questions that you all handed in.
Thank you so much, Ria. So pleasure to be in front of you. Just by way of background, for those of you I haven't met before, I do lead the organization ACE New York. We advocate for clean energy all across the state, everything from wind and solar down to EVs and home energy efficiency. My background was as a renewable energy developer for many years and a farmer. I actually put the green roof on this building. It's my favorite, this is my favorite green roof of all the ones I've done. It's all native New York plants. Anyway, that's an aside. Welcome to this lovely panel, and we have a giant stack of fabulous questions, and this is the most fun conference I think of because this is kind of a Wild West. There are so many great questions. How do we tackle it all with this panel? So here we go. We're gonna see what happens. We have all kinds of categories from battery storage safety to customer incentives to grid upgrades to geothermal. So we're just gonna try to tackle it all. So I'm gonna put a question out, and y'all are welcome to take it. And then when we're done tackling it, we'll go on to the next one. How about that? All right, here goes. All right, let's see where we are. Where did the first one go? I just had it. So does anyone want to tackle the idea of the Internet of Things, where different devices are connected, things like smart meters, which goes to the VPP question. When we have a lot of devices, is there risk in them being hacked, and what is being done to prevent risk there?
That is. Can you hear me? Yes. Ah, great. That's so weird. That is one of the first questions that I do get, and you know, one of the things that there is a risk. And that is why written into the legislation is, you know, there's two pieces to it. One is a set of security requirements for any aggregator or utility that is providing the program, virtual power plant program, to customers. And then for every program that's been put in place in every other state, it really depends on very specific regulations and rules and requirements that are established by, in this case, it would be the Public Service Commission that would be administering the program and designing the regulations. So, you know, those are extremely important in who has access, the structure of the access. And I just wanted to make sure that people understood this is not a situation where you are giving the aggregator of the utility like full access to, remote access to the smart meter in your house. It is a situation where you would sign a contract and you would say, you know, when you're on, it's at peak demand and we're allowing for X number of times per week or per month or year for this duration. I am, for my thermostat, I'm willing to allow for a range of a 1 to 4 degree change. And so it would be preset and established. And then if it is triggered, I can, for myself, if I had it, I could reject it at any one time. So I would have complete control, and that's really important. And then you can leave the program without a penalty. But those cybersecurity requirements for any aggregator is absolutely critical and foundational, you know, at a floor for the program.
Super. Go ahead.
Yeah, just to add, I went through a whole mess of those performance tests. One of the performance tests does look for that. UL 1973 in the module at the BMS level, they actually look at cybersecurity on that end. So it is evaluated as part of the listing for in the fire code, believe it or not.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's great. How do customers, this might be a you, David, question. How do customers see savings on their energy bills with community solar? Because that's often the pitch you hear from the folks selling community solar. How does that actually work?
Yeah, okay. So community solar obviously is a typical community solar project is like 5 megawatt project that could be like 30,000 solar panels in a field somewhere. And it's done with a subscribership basis. And subscribers, the project developer will get compensation for the benefits at which that project provides the utility company. So they get paid, and a portion of what they get paid, they're going to pass on to members within that community solar project. So they are a subscriber to that community solar project, and as a direct result, they will get a certain percentage of their bill reduced on a monthly basis by literally doing nothing but signing up for the project.
Super, thank you. So when energy developers build projects in New York and they get incentives from NYSERDA, for example, do we know that their energy is staying in the state rather than going out of state?
Yeah, we do. They have to, you know, adhere to the interconnection requirements that they're going to interconnect within the utility territory. Those electrons will flow to the utility territory at large and go to where the load is needed within the state of New York. So we are, if the concern is, are we spending money on projects that are not going to benefit New Yorkers, that is not really a concern.
This one might be for the ESRG team. What about dead batteries? And I think this question could be relevant to both the homeowner scale batteries and also these utility scale batteries. What happens when they reach their end of life?
Yeah, when they reach their end of life, they have to have a decommissioning plan as part of their submission. They can be removed from the actual system itself. They'll be evaluated at that particular time. They have to have a stated charge less than 30%. So it needs to, when it gets shipped out, it's compliant to the U.S. Department of Transportation codes as far as when it gets shipped on that end. But there is a decommissioning plan. But they not only in the decommissioning plan are they going to remove the batteries, they're going to check them too to make sure they're not classified as what they call DDR batteries, damaged, defective, or recalled batteries. And then another procedure takes place if that's the case.
Just to add to that on another component of lithium-ion recycling, Stanley Whittingham at Binghamton University, a Nobel laureate who really invented lithium-ion, taught me that like all the lithium ion that is now imported mostly from China, because it's very recyclable and it's got a lot of chemicals in it that and contents in it that are valuable, that recycling is going to be creating imported content into domestic content and be used over again. So I think don't lose sight of it's got cobalt, it's got magnesium, nickel, and all those things are recyclable and usable over again. So it's really important to understand that the more we're importing, the more we have as a domestic content.
So Jay, a question for you. What are some of the policy challenges that you see to deployment of thermal energy networks in New York?
The number one policy challenge is the fact that New York State would love to see energy service companies do these, But the fact is, if you're in New York City or even here in Syracuse, you can't get across the street to run the pipelines without the same types of right-of-way that Con Ed has, for example, in New York City. So the onus, until there is a pathway made, which I quite honestly, I've seen what's in those streets. I would not want to be a developer responsible for crossing the street. I'd rather the utility did it. So I think that is the biggest thing for us to just realize, that the utility must be involved. The second thing, there are silos we're working on in the state right now. And I will tell you this because, not because it's secret, but because it happened. One of the projects we won in New York City, our design team, our consultancy team, was for a wastewater energy extraction at 2 towers in a co-op in the Bronx. They happened to be on the shore of the Jerome Park Reservoir, which is one of 3 big reservoirs that handles the 1 billion gallons that New York City uses every day. Drinking water energy has been proven to be viable and will really reduce infrastructure costs. But it's a silo that when we won the grant, we got called from, well, the governor's office, whoever was regulating it there, said they didn't want to deal with the drinking water exchanging energy with building heating and cooling systems because they didn't understand it. So they required us to take it off. Now, before just leave it there, let's understand that Toronto uses Lake Ontario drinking water to cool the entire downtown district without active refrigeration, because Lake Ontario is sub 40 degrees. So they absorb heat into the drinking water stream and provide 270,000 tons of water with no appreciable burden on the grid. They're saving gigawatts of energy. So I just want to say that that is a silo that we are working on right now, and it will eventually be breached and make drinking water energy pipelines part of our thermal energy network.
Fascinating. Thank you. Does anyone want to tackle the question of other battery chemistries beyond lithium ion?
I mean, we get asked this question a lot. I think it's important to understand that right now there are other chemistries. They're not exactly mass produced yet, and it's mostly geared towards what we would call long duration storage. So double-digit hours and intraday storage, where those chemistries could offer a unique advantage. Right now, lithium ion has the power density and lower cost, and there is no close second right now, to be honest. Right now, lithium ion really is way ahead of everything else, and one of the reasons for that is its power density. So it's used in electric vehicles, which means it's mass marketed, which means there's economy of scale, which means it's driving the cost down. So right now, for the near term, that is simply the best option at this point in time, except for long duration storage, where some other types of chemistries are deploying, but not at the scale of lithium.
So, not sure who to direct this to, but back to the question around greater grid utilization that we spoke about early in the presentations. What are some of the next steps that we all can be taking to make better utilization of our grid? Whether at the policy level or individual level, like how do we get from that peak where we build the grid for the peak utilization to a more balanced utilization?
I can talk, in the context of virtual power plants, what is really important, like right now we have already a lot of the pieces of virtual power plants, the REV and ultimately the value stack that was created. We already have those mechanisms. We know how to do payments, but it's very fragmented, and programs that are put in place to use it are very fragmented. depending on the utility that you're connected with. And programs, you might have solar, and it can participate in one service, and if it's participating in one, it can't participate in another. So like you'll be able to be pulled in for peak demand load, but not necessarily congestion, for example, types of programs. So we need to change the policies to create not only the flexibility and the global landscape of allowing for all of the devices that an individual, like a house, would have in their home to participate, but participate in multiple ones simultaneously. Not double dipping, not getting paid for doing the same benefit, but being able to stack services is really important. And the other thing that's really important is to make sure that there is a floor on the payment, the reimbursement to people providing services, because right now there isn't one that incentivizes true participation. So that's the second really important piece. And the third piece, right now we have a system in place that utilities aren't really incentivized. Distributed energy resource programs exist. They're not really incentivized to use them. There isn't really a structure in place or policies in place to require that participation. So having a bill that says you will have these programs, here are your targets that you must meet for participation. You do need to do reporting on what the value or reimbursement rates are. They have to match the true cost of providing the service. So all of those pieces need to be put in place, because then you'll have a large buy-in from enough people, because you can't really have an effective virtual power plant if there aren't a lot of people participating in the program. So you have to set it up and design it properly from the beginning.
And a clarifying question on that, who are the administrators who actually run virtual power plants? Is it municipalities themselves? Is it private companies? Is it utilities?
So the way that it's designed is that a utility can provide services. They can, a battery program, a non-battery program, or EV program, or you can have an aggregator. So I, as a customer, may sign a contract with an aggregator. The way that the bill is set up is that the utility would be required to provide or make accessible the data from the usage to the aggregator, so that they can participate and be the sort of the middle entity between the utility and the customer. So it can either be provided directly from the utility or an aggregator. Sometimes the utility has created the program, they own the program, but they have an administrator that does the front end platform. But that actually brings it back to just the last question that you asked. And when I was talking about cybersecurity, I think it's important that people understand that it's like stacked, and that's stacked cybersecurity controls by device. So even if you got through one device, it wouldn't immediately mean you have access to like 30,000 individual home devices. But you would have to go through multiple very tight controls on identification. So that's the most important piece to it. And would require that sharing of information through those systems.
Can I suggest something real quick? How many people, by a show of hands, have an electric car? Okay. I just want to say something. I drove over in your electric car this morning, Marguerite, and you have a 220 charger. I have a 220 charger in my garage in Florida. But in my neighborhood, every other house has a Tesla or another electric car. So I just want to point something out because of my electrical background. My fast charger charges at 220 volts, 40 amps. That's enough to run my entire air conditioning system for 6 hours. But the technology isn't readily available to send it back the other way. If we even started by offering a credit to homes that have electric cars that could feed it back into the grid to run their air conditioning, we would have a start, and our virtual power would be automatic from there, And
the estimated, once this is fully operational, the estimated savings is about $2.8 billion per year by 2040. Wow. So it's pretty huge. And of course, that savings is passed on to customers.
And I will say, to directly answer the question, there is a proceeding at DPS right now called Grid of the Future. It's looking at how businesses and homes can be more flexible to adapt on their load and usage to accommodate the utility territory, which benefits everybody. But it's all about price signals and getting those right that make that work or not.
And just to add, that use case where you're taking it from the car into the house is actually addressed in the fire code. So there is prescriptive measures for that in the fire code.
And to clarify for one of these questions that I got based on everything said here, the question is how is the price set to encourage the homeowner to want to participate with their panel or their battery or whatever that is? And that's part of these proceedings. There's a math to say if we're avoiding building more wires and avoiding building that extra power plant for the rainy day, there is a value to that, and that's part of what goes back to the customer as a thank you for participating at all.
Yeah, and I think like what you said about scale is I've been preaching like crazy. A utility territory or a utility might look at the benefits to the grid at large based on hundreds of customers, but you got to look at it as tens of thousands of customers to make it work. And so until you get to the economy of scale, then those price signals will make sense. But that's sometimes where NYSERDA steps in and said, look, this is like a new business opportunity, and it needs injection at the beginning to get to the state of scale. And like in Long Island right now, we're offering an incentive for residents to have energy storage and solar on their homes so that we can get to mass scale and make it a meaningful benefit overall.
The one thing also that is really important to ensure that you have the initial significant buy-in is setting, the price floor, and then creating it. So, you have, for example, on the grid, you have local pressures. And they are, they shift around when they exist, how often they exist. So it's very unreliable. But the way that we have designed the program is that you would identify the average over the entire state, identify a set cost return, and then set that as the base rate for the first 4 years, so that you have a stable return that you would get consistently, so that if someone wanted to do a capital investment in, buy an EV car, for example, they know exactly what return that they would get for the first 4 years of that investment. And that's, for anybody who's doing any kind of, initial capital investment, banks want to see that you have a reliable rate of return. So that's also set into the structure of the bill.
But you have to look at both sides too, right? Reliability is really important, and it's not worth investing in it if you don't think the performance is going to be there. So you have to make sure you have performance and investability.
So I think this question is for Jen. What is your pitch to young people to why this is a good line of work to get into?
Well, first off, you're starting a job with no debt. Many of us spent decades paying off our college debt. You're starting day one, like I said in my presentation, with a good wage, insurance benefits, the pension. Thank you. Also, it's a sector that is only going to continue growing. You're never gonna not be working for the next, several decades.
Super, thank you.
And AI won't take your job?
I would say it would be pretty hard for AI to take over for the electrical industry.
Robots. Shreya, quiet.
So another question for Jay. Putting a couple together here, it seems that thermal energy networks are suited to campuses, right? Are there campuses in New York State that are already using these? And can you give a few examples?
There are several. I don't keep track of that because I'll just give a little background. NYSERDA kept busy during COVID. They had us teaching all of the SUNY facilities people in Zoom, all-day Zoom meetings about this so that they could use local engineering companies to bid on and design that. That's one thing we don't want to do. We never want to step on anyone's feet. So we spent all of COVID doing virtual training, and I would have to ask somebody more qualified than me because I can't keep up with it. There are a lot of campuses that have integrated thermal energy networks. One of the best I know of is right at Cornell. Cornell has a thermal energy network. They use the local lake for passive cooling, and they use a deep thermal well for campus heating. So there are a lot more, and I can't keep track of them anymore.
But yes, Cornell is half of Cornell is private, and half of Cornell is part of the SUNY system. So there's at least one SUNY campus that has a thermal energy network.
Yes, and if anybody knows of any, that'd be great. I should have researched that before I came on and anticipated that question. I'm familiar with several community systems going in because that's what NYSERDA needs help on right now, and so does Con Ed.
And a follow-on question to that. Heated outdoor amusement parks sound awesome, but how do thermal energy networks actually help the everyday person who might not live next to a new outdoor water park?
That is a good point, and I knew that would come up. It should come up because this is more the exception than the rule. So if you think, I'm just going to take one hotel as an example. Just think about this. This is one of the first examples I did in one of my first books. I did a pictorial of this. If you think about a Marriott hotel or even the Craftsman Inn, they have several things that are important. And think about that as a community because in there, they are air conditioning the rooms. I had my air conditioner on yesterday. And they're also doing laundry to launder all the towels and sheets every day. So that laundry needs heated water. So all the heat from the air conditioners, and we've designed Marriotts like this around the world, go from the central air conditioning systems to the laundry and to the pool. They dump all their heat there. So what you end up with, we rate these systems in coefficient of performance. If you put 1 kilowatt in it, how many kilowatts of energy does it move around? So a geothermal system is famous for using 1 kilowatt of energy to give you 5 kilowatts of heat. That's a fact. If you do it like we're talking about here in a campus, one of the most famous campuses is Colorado Mesa University because they started this in the early 2000s. They get a COP combined in the campus of up to 10, which is completely impossible. There is nothing physically that can do that unless you're eating heat from a rejected source to a source that needs it. Then you have kind of the closest thing you'll ever get to perpetual energy. So in a community, you consider all those things, the laundromats, the apartments, maybe the YMCA or the gym. They all can give heat. But here's the big thing. Don't let me fool you. In the summertime, there's lots of extra heat, and you've got to have a place to get rid of all that extra heat in the summertime, and that usually is the biggest problem. But there are answers that are not for this presentation for that. But we can turn that heat into real electricity now. So that's more expensive, and it's a little bit out of our ROI right now.
Super. Thank you so much. So question around how rural fire departments can get compensation or training or grants or something to get the training or the equipment, whatever it is that they need. How can they participate? What is on offer from these storage companies?
All right, so part of the New York State Fire Code that just went into effect mandates that the fire departments where this installation's being put in receive a day of training and then annual training thereafter. So that covers the training for the people who are going to be responding. And when we do that training, we tell the chief, invite your adjoining fire departments who might be coming to help you out. Invite the local hazmat team so they get this training. because we do a very deep dive. You know, we start covering EVs and everything to do with lithium-ion batteries, which is a major source of concern for the fire service. As far as equipment, when the battery company is going through the town board and the zoning board, and they realize maybe we don't have everything we need. Maybe we need a 4-gas meter or CO meters or thermal imaging cameras. That's the time when these companies are trying to get permission from the town to do the installation to hit them up. If you're the fire chief, you know, I was at a meeting where they were saying we need a new tower ladder, and the battery company says, all right, let's not get carried away here. But things like that. And then this training that's done is actually paid for by the developer. So it doesn't cost the municipality or the fire department anything. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, you did great. And I would also add that these battery projects are very dense in terms of dollars. A 1-acre battery project is a tens of millions of dollar facility, even though it just looks like a handful of shipping containers. That's an enormous amount of tax base that you're adding into the town, and that is not subject to pilot agreements or tax exemptions of any kind with respect to the fire tax. So these battery projects are rolling off an enormous amount of fire tax every year that goes directly to the fire department, and the fire department can buy what they will with it.
Yeah, and I do, you know, we do work with developers, and I must say, they have never pushed back on anything as far as equipment is concerned. Of course, if it's a tower ladder, that's different. But no, most of the developers seem to be understanding, and most of them are willing to, you know, buck up and actually get the fire department what they think they may need on that end. So, you know, I have seen that on that end.
Paul, does it make sense to, I don't know if you feel this is appropriate, but to talk about the emergency response plan as well on this?
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, good point. So as I mentioned in my original talk, the emergency response plan, right, is site specific, right, and that's when we're going to start to take a look at their equipment to make sure that they have the appropriate equipment. There really isn't too much that they may need, but we understand there are some rural fire departments that may not have everything that we think may be good for them in the event something were to take place. But those site-specific emergency response plans, going through them and making sure that everything is needed and everything is approved by the fire commander or whoever it is, the chief at that time. And in fairness, you know, when we do go into some of the smaller departments, we like to have firefighter, you know, we're on one side, they're on the other side, but we try to tell them, look, we understand you may not understand this. So we really try to have that trust with them that let us explain this to you, let us explain how this is going to work on your end as far as the emergency response plan is concerned. Because some of them, they're intimidated by it. They really are intimidated by what's coming their way. And we really want to make sure that they understand it. So they feel confident and they're like, okay, yeah, we see this. If something were to happen, we want to make sure that they understand that the code is built out to make sure the event is manageable on their end. And that's important, is making sure it's manageable.
Question around, here's one specific one. Should I buy a fire cabinet for all the batteries that I've got in my home, from drills and riding mowers and things like that?
That's a really good question. That's a great question. I'm not touching that one.
Someone just asked me that on the break because they have a rechargeable lawnmower and snow blower and everything else. Someone who's all in on batteries. They do make cabinets, and we tested them out at the New York City Fire Academy because we had the issue of the food delivery workers. They were the ones who were really pushing these e-bikes to their maximum limit. You know, these are devices that were made for recreation. They're being used almost on an industrial scale all day long, hot swapping batteries. So we actually designed outdoor charging cabinets so they could leave the battery outside, put it into a locked cabinet, and then take it out or swap it with a charged battery. They also make home ones, but they're very expensive. And my recommendation is typically for your home battery devices make sure it's listed by Underwriters Laboratory. It'll have a sticker on it. Now, there are counterfeit stickers out there, of course, especially in New York. If there's a scam, it's figured out and developed in New York City. But you can go on the UL website if you're concerned to determine if it's an actually listed product. And then, of course, they sell smoke detectors, so if you charge your devices in the garage, they're interconnected now, and I put these in my home. So if there is a fire in your garage, it'll alarm the one next to your bedroom, and you can get out and just make sure you have insurance. I always say if my house burnt to the ground and I got everybody out, it would be a relief, and I could start over. You know?
Yeah. But just to add to that, like, because back when we had a lot of the in FDNY territory incidents with e-bikes and food delivery messengers, like there's 60,000+ food delivery e-bike messengers in the delivery people in the city, and that's a lot. And the biggest problem, from what I was learning, and you probably know better than I do, is they were oftentimes using the wrong charger for a battery, right? This is like the whole safe thing, I get it, but like I think it's really important to understand things you can control much better, which is use the charger that comes with the battery. Make sure both are UL inspected. Don't put a really long extension cord on it, right? Yeah. Like these are the things that I think you have to understand more than saying, should I lock all these up and charge them somewhere, you know?
Yeah, and again, adding on to that, standard of care. Consumer products. People throw them on the floor. They leave them out in the sun all day long. It starts to degrade the battery as a result of the standard of care not being there. So the degradation of the battery starts to lead to problems later on down the road.
As a legislator, it's really hard for me. How many times have we been, oh, that's a bill. Did you do that too? I'm like, oh, you know the tags on like your hair dryer that says like all the warning, like please don't like blow dry your hair while you're taking a shower, right? You know that it should say.
So you're just thinking like a duck farm, basically. How many bills do I have? You know,
no,
like.
Well, I'm thinking though, like people need to see that in front of them. Like, please don't use an extension cord if you're using, please don't. But, sometimes it doesn't think, we don't. So, like, we need it in big, huge, bold, like, red writing in front of us. It needs to be on that tag that's like, anyway.
Yeah, no, good point.
Changing topics for a minute here. If you visit Long Island, you see a lot of parking lot solar there. You don't see a lot of parking lot solar here in Syracuse. Anybody want to tackle why that is?
Yeah, New York City has a lot, mostly because I created an incentive that's an adder incentive if you're building a carport in New York City, which is not in the rest of state region, just because there's such a limited amount of space down in Long Island and New York City to build solar. The carports, I think a lot of people love them. They're extraordinarily more expensive than traditional community solar type projects. Possibly 30, 40, 50% more expensive. It's a lot more steel. It's limited. You can't replicate it very much. It's a lot more labor. So it's difficult to have mass scale with carports. I mean, I know it sounds really good, but it's very expensive. So that reality is there. The return on investment, if you could build a solar project in Long Island and New York City's higher because the electricity costs are much higher there. So it's sometimes more able to build one downstate than upstate because of the land resource we have here and the land restrictions that are down there, as well as the cost at which the benefits the solar project gets in return because of the high electricity costs. So it's a good way to go about it, but it's slightly niche because of its high cost.
Here's a tough one. It's a really good question, so I'm going to ask it anyway, but y'all might hate me. So, how do utility subsidies and business models incentivize the overbuilding of the grid that we were discussing earlier, and how can we change their business models so that they want a more efficient grid?
I just want to say, as a consumer with an electric car, I would jump at the chance to use that electric. Think about this. I get home in the afternoon. Just then, my thermostat says, hey, we're on peak. We're going to take you up to 78 degrees. I would love to be able to switch that over to my air conditioning and help the grid and everything. And even if they just offered a free device that did that to reduce peak, I would jump on it. I would probably pay for it, but it's not available in Florida right now.
So just so I understand your question, you were asking the incentive to customers to have customers participate, or the incentive for utilities to participate?
The utilities. How do we get utilities to want a more efficient grid like we want a more efficient grid?
Yeah. So, I mean, that is like the question right now, because we have a system where, the utilities are monopoly systems by design. And we tried to do this integrating distributed energy resources, what was it, 10 years ago?
Rev?
Yes, it was 10 years ago, right? And
About 10
about
years
10.
ago, Audrey Zibelman was the commissioner. Yep.
Yeah, re-envisioning the energy vision called the REV. And there are still remnants of that system that are in place. So if there is, if a utility believes that there is, based on their measurements, there's a need for increased infrastructure or capacity, as part of the application for approval for that capital investment, they first have to look to see whether or not that capacity could be provided by distributed energy resources first. But so that is a good thing, and that was designed by the REV, but the way the system works now is that the utilities are sort of incentivized to look at it in like very small portions, kind of isolated portions of the project, sort of towards the end of the planning process. And all of that ultimately ends up in reality creating a system where it's a little bit of like, okay, you took care of looking at it, now let's go back to like the capital investment. And of course, why they have that, why they're incentivized to build is because the way that they are paid, they are guaranteed a return on all of that capital investment, and they're guaranteed a rate of return on that investment, like say 9%. So ratepayers pay all of the cost of the capital that they put in, plus we pay for their return. And that, of course, the more capital infrastructure they build, then the more profit they make. And then in the formula for our rate cases, is something called a rate base, which is, well, now you've built it, well, now you have to maintain it. So now we'll put more each time we do a rate case because you need to maintain it. Oh, and also the deferred maintenance. So again, then that's more capital or more money that we give them in rate cases. So that's part of why we're seeing this increase in our rate cases. So there is policy that needs to be put in place, like, virtual power plant is one of the things that needs to be put in place, but it really requires and incentivizes within the program itself to shift over to a distributed energy system more comprehensively and divert from this knee-jerk reaction to continue to build capital infrastructure. I don't know, David, did you want to add anything? You're the expert.
I think you covered a lot of it. I think the state's just trying to find a balance there between, the market at which we have today and the infrastructure builds that you're talking about with the utility, and then what private industry could offer. And so it's all comes down to policy at that point. And I think that was the balance that we're trying to find. Yeah.
There's an interesting bill that was passed in Virginia in the past couple of months that aims to get at this and is trying to make a payment metric for the utility for utilization rates. The higher utilization rate, in other words, the greater efficiency on the grid, the more the utility gets paid, rather than the more expensive stuff they build, the more it gets paid, which is the current model we've got here in New York.
There was actually one really interesting bill that was passed into law in Oregon. I think it's now passed in 2 or 3 states, but it shifts from a utilization rate to performance-based payments. So, what is your customer service? How much diverted energy, distributed energy resources are you putting on the grid? Then you actually get paid for that performance. How much have you reduced the total greenhouse gas emissions? What is your outage rate, and how quickly do you respond and get things back on? That's all performance. So you could create an entire payment structure that is based on their performance and not the size of their grid. And I think that the reason that we established it as the size of the grid is because 100 years ago, we were trying to incentivize utilities to build out to the most rural areas. We don't need that anymore. So shifting to a system where we are maintaining based on their performance might be something we should be looking at.
Does anybody want to tackle the question of misinformation? How do we deal with the amount of misinformation that's going on around clean energy in communities these days? What can we do about that?
Yeah, I'll do that and world peace together at the same time.
Excellent.
How's that?
I have an example of the problem. I'm so pleased with what New York does, but since 2010, we've been the lead consultant for Disney worldwide. They have so many geothermal projects. We are completely embargoed on talking about it because they don't want to deal with people that say it causes earthquakes, they do fracking, all this stuff. So we can't talk about it. Interesting to think about that. That was just their thoughts on the difficulty of public relations.
Good thing you're not talking about it. Yeah.
I can tell. There is actually one thing they brag about. They did the Grand Floridian with the lake out in front. They used a lake plate geothermal exchanger. They didn't call it geothermal, though. They said, we're using the lake to cool the Grand Floridian, and they show a video of it. It's on our YouTube channel, and it's really good. But they won't show anybody drilling. No, they don't want to show that.
Jen, I think you were going to say something?
I was just going to say, I think when developers communicate with the communities that they're building in, it's very helpful. We've worked with a lot of developers that will have, night public meetings where folks can come ask questions. They'll do webinars, things like that. It's obviously not a cure-all, but I do think it helps when the developers are actually putting in the effort.
Yeah, I think I would double down on that. I think developers need to do more than they're even inclined to do. I mean, if they think level of effort should be X, it should really probably be 10X, because that's how much opponents, I think, are putting in the level of effort. And so we just need to meet them where they are.
Yeah, there is a lot of misinformation out there, a lot. I was speaking to a young woman from planning, from a town, and she had mentioned this. Is there some way that we can get education out to the community itself? And there is, again, there's a lot of bad information, especially on the fires part. I deal with a lot of it constantly. How many miles are we going to have to evacuate if this were to go on fire? And my eyes just kind of open up widely, like, evacuate what? Where? We have these right across the street from a school in New York City. And trust me, this is all looked at. They're not doing this as haphazardly, but they feel that these things are pretty safe. And if something were to take place, they can manage it. So, and I'll give you an example. I went out to another state. I had to fly there. I won't tell you where it was. Where they did an evacuation. And I'm about 150, 200 feet away from this thing that's smoldering. And I'm looking at the incident commander, dressed like this, saying, this doesn't make sense, right? You have an evacuation over a mile, and we're standing here like this with no respiratory protection on, no personal protection. I'm like, this doesn't pass the smell test. It just doesn't make sense. And that's the one thing that I can say. The fire service is most of the people are extremely sensible. And I'm not blaming that incident commander. That person was pressured. So just so you know, not to knock that person at all. You know, he was taking orders way above him. But most of the firefighters, they understand the reality and practical stuff. And sometimes they're shaking their head like, what are we doing here? And I'm sure there's firefighters in the room here that are probably saying, yeah, I understand that. I get that. I've been to 5 incidents. All of them I was dressed like this. Maybe the furthest I was was about 500 feet from it. I'm not telling you that people should go up there and say, let me get in there and get a whiff of this stuff. I'm just telling you.
Yeah. You bring a bag of marshmallows.
Yeah, but
with you,
I do want to give you reality of this, you know, of what goes on out there in my world for someone that has responded to 5 incidents.
And I just add one last thing to this, and this is for all of us that again, the state electeds in the room, we've experienced this. The number one trick that the fossil fuel industry uses is they will target. They'll criticize like some aspect. And we have one colleague, for example, every single time we talk about solar or wind, do you know about the child labor in the Congo for cobalt? That is unacceptable and will go on for 15 minutes, and we hear it every single time. So I was so annoyed at one point. I had an intern, and we wrote an entire research paper on the comparative child labor that is actually in the fossil fuel industry versus cobalt, right? So, and that's the trick that we need to continue to bring back, is that they do an absolute where they're just criticizing the thing. And we're not saying that we're perfect. We're just saying that we're better. So, I think if you can just bring it back to the relative, we're just trying to make steps to improve, reduce the child labor, the slave labor, the greenhouse gas emissions. We might not get to 0, but we're a heck of a lot better than staying with the status quo. And I think we don't need to be perfect.
That's a great point. Question for ESRG folks. Volunteer firefighters are very concerned about battery storage because of the difficulty of extensioning a fire. I don't know what that means, but I'm hoping you do.
So I believe what the question was referring to is if one of these cabinets that we had up on the screen was on fire, would that fire propagate or spread to an adjoining container? Whoever wrote that question, am I getting it? All right. So that's when Paul had mentioned the UL 9540A testing regime, which all these batteries and systems have to go through. And one of the main points of the testing is to determine how the thermal runaway and the resulting fire can spread from cell to cell, from module to module, and then from unit to unit. And they do heat flux analysis on the outside of these containers when they put them into a full failure burn to determine what the distance should be from an adjoining container or from a lot line or from an adjoining building. And that's where they come up with these statistics. And these fires are not spreading to an adjoining container. However, we realize there could be a worst case scenario, like consistent 70-mile-an-hour winds, which you see in some parts of the country and world. And that's where we do part of the fire department training is, what if that does happen? Because we always train for the absolute worst case. Worst case, there's fire affecting an adjoining container. The good thing is that the battery management system in all these containers is being remotely monitored, and that information is being relayed from the responding subject matter expert that's required to be on scene or on the phone in New York State. And he can see, is there an increase in the heat level of an adjoining container? If so, that information is transmitted directly to the incident commander, the fire incident commander, and he can direct a fog stream, a cooling fog stream, to that adjoining container and cool it down. So that's a great, there's so much information available thanks to the remote monitoring, the responding subject matter expert, that the whole goal of this state code that Paul worked on and with a lot of other people was to make the firefighter and the fire chief's job easier and more effective and safer for his firefighting members.
All right, pivoting for another totally different direction. We are seeing more and more natural disasters all around the world, giant destructive things, and of course there's wars every now and then. When these things destroy the electrical grid, which is sometimes what happens, how can we utilize the modern technology in the inevitable rebuild that happens? And are there good examples of this?
I don't know if we have the level of expertise on this panel to answer that question. I know I don't have that, but does anyone else?
I can throw an example in to warm us up if you
Okay.
want. In Puerto Rico, as you know, I don't know how many years ago, there was a terrible hurricane, destroyed a great deal of the island's grid. There was a great deal of discussion and debate about the degree to which it should be rebuilt as it had been, effectively, or could we do a leapfrog thing here and just get to a better system altogether? 10% of the households of Puerto Rico now have battery backup. 10%. And that was put in because those folks didn't want to have a blackout, and because even ongoing, a lot of, the Puerto Rican grid has blackouts almost every day. And so folks have invested in that. And so now there are virtual power plants there as well. And you actually see more virtual power plants in places that have poor grid service than anywhere else because people choose to invest in that. And that's an example of the leapfrogging because of these events.
I think also one of the things that I've seen in some places are the thermal energy networks, which are less, they're more resilient in those contexts. So putting the two of them together, I just wanted to throw that out there, and I'd be curious what your...
Yes, one of the main things we get when we're questioned about the weakness, people will say, yeah, you've got the thermal energy network, but what if you lose power? And that's kind of an interesting question because, yeah, if you lose power, you don't have the power to run the compressors or the pumps. Interestingly enough, some of our first big projects were for federal government, for Department of Defense installations, because when you do a thermal network on a base, you eliminate, because they do all the electrical underground, but you eliminate the outside condensers and outside cooling towers, so the HVAC system is completely untouchable unless they do a crater and take it out.
Do a crater and take it out? Can you
Well,
explain that?
and they blow up the street, and so yeah.
Ah,
You know,
okay.
if
So in
there's a
other words-
crater where a building was, it stands to reason the building's not going to operate.
Got it.
The absence of anything.
So weather events are unlikely to disturb it. Warfare is more likely to disturb it.
There was a headline during Hurricane Sandy in the New York Times, and I still have it. It was one of my favorite headlines of all time. It says, geothermal systems arise as a storm-proof resource in Sandy. What they did was a sweep of Long Island and New York City, and a lot of people lost their cooling towers on the big buildings. A lot of people had flooding. So now in buildings, the equipment goes up a little higher, the cooling towers are off, and just for a factoid, because I feel like mentioning it right now, in the United States, half of all commercial buildings are geothermal now that go under construction. It makes so much sense. Plus, the Fed pays 40%. They'll write a check to anybody for doing geothermal now. They have $1 trillion for geothermal upgrades.
Awesome, thank you. Pivoting again, electric school buses. There has been a mandate for electric school buses. There's been much debate as to whether that's the right thing to do. Why not a different set of vehicles? Why was buses where we started?
It made a lot of sense, right? There's 42,000 school buses in the state of New York, more than any other state in the country. They're utilized part of the time, right? There's exceptional potential for vehicle to grid opportunity. They're not operating in the summer too much, which is when the grid needs the power the most, so they could be standby power for the grid. And it's much healthier for students and kids, right? They're not breathing diesel emissions and NOx and SOx, particulate matter. So there was a lot of reason for it. It's, you know, a challenging endeavor right now because we do have $600 million from the Bond Act to help incentivize the transition from diesel to battery buses. There is a cost differential between the two, of which the incentive covers most of that. But when it comes to misinformation and polarization in our politics right now, what we're seeing is in order to purchase school buses, the constituents in a school district have to vote on it. And even though the school district sometimes wants to do it, I think the misinformation gets out there and sometimes reject that vote. So it becomes somewhat challenging. But I think it's a no-brainer, obviously. In my opinion, we need some school districts to dip their toe in the water and try it with a percentage of their fleet. And they will see that it is a really good opportunity. And what we're seeing in our fleet electrification plans, which we provide at very low cost to school districts, that 80% of the routes in New York State are good and acceptable and viable for an electric school bus. That's a big deal. And what we're learning a lot from these fleet electrification plans right now, that the school districts can look at their fleets and have a third-party engineering report and gives them the viability of transitioning, and the reports are looking good. I think it's going a little slower than we want it to right now. However, I think in the long run it's going to happen. It's just a question of getting people comfortable with it, and that's what I want to focus on now.
I think the health piece is actually kind of underrated. The worst air quality that children are exposed to on a daily basis is the diesel fumes from their school bus. So pivoting, or like building on the diesel thing, asking our firefighter friends here, tell us about the codes that are relevant to diesel and natural gas generators. Are there codes or standards or safety things, and how does that be the same or different than battery storage as backup generation by comparison?
Good question. So there are numerous fossil fuel generators still in New York City for backup systems. Hospitals have them. And there is a permit, so there's certain guidelines that they need to do. But most of them are either run on diesel or natural gas is the ones that we're seeing out there. But the requirements is not as robust of what we see with the battery energy storage systems. We didn't tell them put them things on fire and let's see what happens. So yeah, the requirements are not that robust. And remember, when you have thousands of gallons of diesel fuel, that's a tremendous fire load on the bottom of a building. And we saw what happened during 9/11. That diesel was burning for months because of all of the diesel fuel that they had in the basement of the World Trade Center. So yeah, there's not much that the fire code really addresses on that. It's kind of settled, and eventually, you know, it's funny. They were looking to put a huge battery energy storage in my community, and there were a couple of millions of gallons of gasoline that was going to be removed, and the community didn't want the battery energy storage. And I said, they truly do not understand the hazards. I said, if this thing gets breached or if there's a fire in one of these million-gallon tanks, it's unbelievable, right? There's no compartmentation that I mentioned before. And it was just shocking that they did not understand the risk. They were actually reducing risk in their own community. So sorry to go into that tangent, but it's something
Tangent's welcome. That's a very good point you make. All right, let's see. Oh no, we've asked that one already. Sorry. For battery systems, is the peer review step required or optional? And at what point in the review process does that happen?
I'll hand it off to ESRG, but it is now required. I don't know if my mic's working. Oh, there we go. It is required right now. It was optional prior to the new code. Yeah, noticed that. That's why I had to jump in and cover you, Paul. I'm covering you. I got you, buddy. It's all good.
Thank you, David. What was the question?
The question,
I just answered it. We're good.
Oh, we're good. Okay, all right. Move on.
thank you, David. What is National Grid doing to facilitate additional renewable energy generation interconnection? And what obstacles do you see to greater deployment of renewable energy and large-scale battery storage?
So what is National Grid doing? Can you repeat that
Or
again?
any utility for that matter. What are the utilities doing to facilitate additional renewable energy generation and interconnecting to the grid? And what obstacles remain to deploying more renewables and more battery storage on the grid?
Sam, aren't you doing something with National Grid and flexible interconnection? No, that wasn't you? No. I think there are some... You tried? Okay. There are some pilot programs, I can't remember, I think with National Grid, where they're working with certain developers on what's called flexible interconnection that lowers the cost of interconnecting to the grid with a certain amount of what we call curtailment, like 5 to 10% curtailment agreement. And there's actually a lot of talk from industry and a lot of talk from utilities and DPS on how we can dive into what's called interconnection reform to better lower the cost and create more opportunity for renewables to get on the grid. We're not there yet, but I'm hoping and optimistic that that'll move forwards and be a benefit for all.
Question about water. So when there is a battery fire, I know that some testing was done with the battery storage working group. Can you talk about the water runoff and what was looked at, what was found or not found?
The only thing that I can talk about water was the work that was done by NYSERDA and after the events that took place, and there was no impact on them. So that, you know, we have water runoff on every single structure fire we have, just so you know, and some of that stuff could be nasty, but this is one of the reasons that we ask you, and Danny had mentioned it before, that we say hold off on the water on the actual cabinet that may be on fire, put it on the exposure, and that will actually reduce any type of runoff on that end. And that's one of the reasons. There's other reasons why we have there. The cabinet doors are locked. We don't want firefighters walking up to the cabinet door, snapping a lock, opening up the cabinet door, and putting a hose line in there. That makes no sense at all. You're not saving anything. The thing is done. It's finished, right? So why would you bother putting someone safety on the line as a result of that? But again, going back to the water itself, is just putting it on the exposure is going to help to reduce any type of runoff.
I never realized, like working with you, Paul, and your team, I never realized how sensitive water topic is when it comes to putting a fire out. Remember, we were on a panel a few years ago, and one of your colleagues said, you're much worse off seeing a Home Depot fire than you are a battery energy storage fire with the amount of contaminants that can go into the ground. And then, as I said, DEC did study the soil, air, and water on all incidents. Nothing outside the fence line or even within the fence line was levels above acceptability.
That's fantastic. That's great news.
Jay, can you help explain, you were talking about drinking water energy exchange. That's not the right words.
It is the right word.
paraphrasing.
You
Okay.
did perfectly.
Could you help explain exactly what you were talking about? Like, where is the drinking water part versus the heat exchange part? Is my drinking water getting mixed with nasty chemicals? Help me understand.
All right, this is a fun one, and we have a great image for this, but let me just talk about two acronyms that we have in the industry. One is wastewater energy transfer. We call it WET. And then drinking water energy transfer. It's coming and going. Think about this. So when the wastewater leaves a building, we can strip the heat out of it. and that can create all the hot water. We do that by sending it through what's called a double wall plate and frame exchanger. So there are isolated streams, no different. I want to mention something. Think about the drinking fountain you use to fill your water bottle. That has a refrigeration circuit in it. That has an NSF approved refrigerant to water exchanger. Now, so when we did this in Long Island in 2016, and the Long Island school, and I forget the name of it because I'm not an encyclopedia, but I can pull it
Nearly.
up if you email me. But they tapped into the drinking water line, they pulled it into a pump house and exchanged it with a brand new condenser water loop that upgraded the school to geothermal heat pumps. And that water was tested on the outflow by Oak Ridge National Laboratories, and that report is available, and it was completely unchanged in water quality. What they do in the wintertime is they pull heat from the water stream, and in the summertime they put heat into the water stream. And what that's saying is, based on the capacity of the water in a given place, which amounts to 40 or 50% of the entire heating and cooling load in any given place, you can use drinking water energy transfer and eliminate the need to drill wells just through the drinking water lines. Now, if you add the wastewater lines to that, you might be able to get close to the whole thing, but we haven't done a study on coming and going yet. Is there a university?
Is it a university or
It was a middle school. A middle school, and it's in if you look up drinking water energy, if you Google drinking water energy in Long Island, it was actually something that was promoted and paid for by the Public Service Commission. And then they shelved it because there's too much resistance, like I talked about. It's too sensitive a topic after Flint, Michigan, and everything else. Even though we use water coolers right here, and everything else in a restaurant has ice goes through the same process, and we use that.
You're right. Ice, that's how an ice maker does its job, isn't it?
Exactly, and we trust ice, just like it's the misconception about batteries. Yeah,
We trust some kinds of ice.
yeah. We trust ice.
Does anyone have one last comment they want to make sure gets said before we take a pause for lunch here?
I do. I want to support Anna on taking this all the way to the state on using my Tesla to. I just want this working because when New York does it, everybody does it. It knocks down the dominoes, and you can take it into any legislature.
Thank you to all my panelists. Amazing conversation.
I think this is incredible. I like it.